The rain hit the simulation glass in long silver lines, and Commander Vex had not yet realized his entire career was standing 5 paces away in a coat of grey mud. Maya Okonkwo did not raise a weapon. She did not speak. She simply straightened her spine, one vertebra at a time, slow and deliberate, and the jungle went quiet around her. The tactical console behind the commander chimed 3 times. Low, even, final. She watched his faceplates shift, the chitinous ridges above his eye clusters spreading apart the way they only did when something had gone deeply, irreversibly wrong. 40 cycles of perfect simulation record, 200 campaigns. One girl from a rock most of the galaxy had already voted to forget. The console chimed again. "The scenario is concluded, Commander," she said. Her voice dropped into the synthetic downpour, the way an anchor drops into still water. "Your manual is officially out of print." He did not answer. The jungle held its silence with her. "Stay close. The part that breaks the manual comes next. You'll want to hear how we got here." 14 hours earlier, the orientation hall smelled of burnt copper and industrial solvent. Maya noticed it the moment the doors sealed. That particular mix, copper-sharp and faintly sweet, the way overused recycled air always turned when 200 species breathed it long enough. She filed it away, not because it mattered, because she filed everything away. She was sitting in row 14. Not by accident. Row 14 sat at the precise geometric center of the amphitheater's sight lines, visible from every tier, accessible from 4 exit corridors, positioned exactly 15 body lengths from the lecture podium. She had measured it the night before with her boot heel. The cadets around her were already sorting themselves by biology. The scaled Korvath in clusters near the upper cooling vents, the Felnari packed tight along the left wall, where the bioluminescent panels pulsed at a frequency their skin could echo. The Cran units, exoskeletal, broad, their breathing seals hissing on a slow rhythm, had claimed the front rows entirely, the way dominant species always claimed front rows. Nobody had sat within 2 seats of Maya. Professor Velnix arrived without announcement. He was tall, narrow-bodied, with 4 primary digits and the kind of institutional confidence that comes from never having been wrong in a setting that punished being wrong. He set his data slate on the podium without looking at it, touched a single control, and the holographic projector above the amphitheater bloomed crimson. The word Earth hung in the air above 200 alien cadets. Beneath it, Class 12 Crucible, Terminal Designation, Evolution, Blood Sport Classification. "This," Velnix said, "is where she comes from." He pointed 1 primary digit at Maya Okonkwo. The whole tier turned. Maya did not move. She kept her hands flat on the composite desk, her green eyes running a slow, even track across the nearest Korvath cadet, whose pale blue scales had already shifted 2 shades toward gray. "Cadet Okonkwo represents the Terran integration cohort," Velnix continued, his voice carrying the flat, patient tone of a man who considered himself generous for explaining the obvious. "Unarmored, single-layer skeletal structure, no natural toxins, no environmental resistance suite, no regenerative capacity. By every standard metric in our classification system, the Terran species should not have survived contact with their own atmosphere past the first geological age." He let that sit. Somewhere in the back rows, a Felnari's skin spots dimmed to a pale, anxious gold. "And yet," Velnix said, "here she is." Maya cracked her index finger knuckle, just the one. The sound was small and dry and somehow carried across the entire amphitheater. She raised her hand. Velnix's eye clusters rotated toward her with the specific quality of a professor who had not expected to be interrupted before his 3rd slide. "Cadet. The classification uses the word prey-species in the behavioral index," Maya said. Her voice was even, not aggressive, the kind of even that meant she had already decided what she was going to say and found no reason to perform uncertainty about it. "I want to clarify the distinction between prey behavior and pursuit hunting. They are not the same category." Velnix's primary digits spread on the podium surface. "The distinction is noted in. Prey behavior is reactive, The animal runs when threatened, stops when the threat retreats. Pursuit hunting is something different. She paused, not for effect. She just wanted him to catch up. Pursuit hunters follow, past exhaustion, past the point the prey animal believes it has escaped. Our fossil record shows that human hunting groups would track a single animal for 3 days without stopping. Another pause. The animal would eventually fall over. The Felnari in the left row had gone almost entirely dark. The classification system, Maya said, would need to account for that before calling us prey species. Respectfully. Velnix looked at her for a long moment. His faceplates did not move. Your previous theoretical assignment, he said, did account for that, in ways the Directorate found comprehensive. He touched the data slate. The next projection was Maya's assignment, or rather, it was the 17-line violation report attached to it. No, strike that, it was the color of the violation report that landed first, deep red, the shade the Directorate reserved for actions that technically had no category. Each line held a single phrase: weaponization of local water supply, non-consensual ecological manipulation, deliberate induced environmental collapse within a designated safe zone. 17 interstellar warfare conventions, Velnix said, violated in a single theoretical exercise. It was a simulation, Maya said. The conventions apply to simulations. Then the conventions have a gap in them, she said. Where I come from, water is the oldest weapon. We were using it before we had words for what we were doing. That's not a violation, that's context. The amphitheater had gone very still. Here was the thing nobody in row 14 seemed to have understood yet. Maya was not angry. There was no heat in her voice. She was simply describing the contents of a room they had all agreed to pretend was empty. Your assignment received a failing mark, Velnix said. He said it the way someone lays a card on a table, not as cruelty, but as the kind of finality that ends discussions. Maya nodded once, I know. She cracked her middle knuckle. Your species' historical record, Velnix continued, now addressing the full amphitheater, shows a pattern of what the Directorate has formally classified as tactical atrocity. Actions committed at scale, with consistency, across every documented conflict period, without apparent remorse or doctrinal restraint. This is not a criticism, he paused. It is a classification. It is also, Maya said, a legacy. The Korvath cadet nearest her had now shifted from grey to white along his scale ridges, a color, she had learned in week 2, that his species only reached under genuine threat perception. He had not moved. He was just changing color at her, involuntarily, the way a body does when the older brain decides the newer brain is being dangerously relaxed. She found this privately interesting. Velnix pulled the next slide. It showed a tactical map, a dense canopy jungle environment, simulation generated, with 2 force positions marked at opposite ends of a grid. In 2 weeks, he said, the High Galactic Simulation Cadre will conduct the annual War Games exercise. This year, first-year integration cadets will be evaluated in a live environmental matrix against established senior tactical units. He looked at the amphitheater. The opposing force will be led by Commander Vex of the High Galactic Tactical Directorate, 40-cycle undefeated simulation record, 212 sequential victories. He looked back at Maya. I say this not to discourage participation, cadet. I say it to calibrate expectation. Maya looked at the map. The jungle simulation was dense. Tight canopy cover, 3 river corridors, limited long-range visibility. She thought about the water. Understood, she said. Velnix moved on. The rest of the lecture was about defensive geometry. Maya listened to all of it. She did not take notes. She did not need to, and she had found that writing things down in rooms where everyone was watching you write things down gave people the wrong impression of what you were thinking. The cafeteria on sublevel 3 smelled of something that could charitably be called protein synthesis and less charitably be called an argument between sulfur and old metal. Maya set her tray down at the table farthest from the cooling vents, the table nobody claimed, for the simple reason that the ambient hum from the environmental systems was loudest there, and most species found it irritating. She had been sitting there every meal for 6 days. She was not alone now. Rickson arrived first. He was Korvath, triple-jointed arms, scales that ran from deep blue at the shoulder to a fragile, washed-out near-white at the wrist. He sat across from her without asking. His scales were already cycling toward grey, which was, Maya had come to understand, his default color in her presence. She didn't take it personally. His nervous system was honest. Parla came next, sliding into the seat beside Rickson with the careful, deliberate movement of someone who had learned to keep their bioluminescent patches small in public. Her skin dots were a muted, cautious amber. She set her food container down with both hands and looked at Maya the way people look at someone they're not entirely sure is going to bite them. Thorn arrived last, and arrived was the right word. Thorn was 7 feet of cran exoskeleton and iron-rimmed breathing seal, and his arrival at any table registered as an event. He folded himself into the reinforced chair at the end with the slow, deliberate care of something that had broken furniture before and was trying to demonstrate that it had learned from the experience. "You've been watching us," Rickson said, not an accusation, a statement of fact offered with the resigned quality of someone who had grown used to being watched and had opinions about it. "Yes," Maya said. She reached across the tray and picked up the vibration spike, a dining utensil, technically made of structural resin, designed to test food density before consumption. She tapped it once against the edge of the metal tray. The frequency it produced was sharp and carrying, a single note that cut cleanly through the cafeteria's ambient noise and made 2 Felnari at the next table look up. She set it back down. "The war games," she said, "you're all on the reserve list, which means you're available to be assigned to any cohort that has open slots." She looked at each of them. "I have open slots." Thorn's breathing seal let out a slow, pressurized exhale. "You failed 17 conventions in a theoretical exercise," he said. His voice came out slightly distorted through the filtration membrane, giving everything he said the quality of a statement delivered from the bottom of a well. "Our academic records are already marginal. Association with your cohort." "Our academic records," Maya said, "are why we're all sitting at the table that nobody wants." Silence. Rickson's scales had gone a full shade lighter. "The war games evaluation is pass or transfer," Maya continued. "If we lose as a reserve unit, we lose quietly. Nobody cares. If we win," she paused, not for drama, just to let the actual logic breathe. "If we win, we don't lose quietly." Parla's skin dots shifted, not the anxious amber, something cooler, closer to green. Maya tapped the vibration spike once more against the tray, one sharp, carrying note, and picked up her food. "Sub-level training bay 7, she said. "Tonight, 1700 hours." She did not ask if they were coming. She already knew they would. They came. All 3 of them. Rickson arrived 4 minutes early, which told Maya something. Parla arrived exactly on time, which told her something else. Thorn arrived 7 minutes late, which told her the most, because Thorn was not the kind of species that misread directions, which meant the 7 minutes had been deliberate, a small performance of reluctance designed to establish that he was not entirely committed, which he absolutely was. Sub-level training bay 7 was not designed for what Maya intended to use it for. It was a storage overflow space, technically reinforced walls, a poured composite floor scuffed from years of equipment transit, 2 overhead light panels that hummed at slightly different frequencies and created a faint, uneven beat in the air. No environmental matrix, no virtual parameters. No administrative algorithm running in the background, tracking force distribution and acceptable contact thresholds. Just a room. Maya stood in the center of it, unarmored, wearing gray utilities. She had moved 3 equipment crates to the wall. The vibration spike was on the bench beside the door, its resin tip resting against the steel lip with a faint, almost inaudible hum. "The Directorate's training model," she said without preamble, "assumes that combat is a calculation. You run the parameters, you model the defensive geometry, you optimize shield distribution, you win." She looked at the 3 of them. "That model works against species who also run the parameters. it does not work against us. Thorn's breathing seal cycled, because you don't run the parameters. Because we learned to fight before we had parameters. She moved to the center of the floor. I need you to hit me. Rickson's scales shifted, not to gray this time, but to a blue so deep it was almost black. That's not a request, Maya said. An exercise. Come at me from my left side. Don't model it. Don't calculate angles, just come. Rickson came. He was fast, triple-jointed arms gave Korvath a reach advantage that their linear doctrine almost always wasted, because the doctrine said to extend and lock, a geometric pattern that was efficient against shielded opponents and completely predictable against anyone who had spent their childhood in environments where predictability was how you died. Maya slipped inside his extension by dropping her left shoulder, redirected his momentum with one open hand against his forearm, and stepped behind him. She did not strike. She simply stood behind him, her chin approximately at his shoulder blade, and said, "You locked." Rickson straightened. His scales were doing something complicated. Again, Maya said, don't think about geometry, think about closing distance. They ran it 6 more times. By the 4th repetition, Rickson had stopped locking. By the 6th, he was doing something that looked, in a tentative and uncertain way, like improvising. Paula went next. Her problem was different. Felnari used their bioluminescent patches as distraction, a flash pulse technique that disrupted visual processing in most species. Maya watched the first 2 attempts with her eyes open, let the pulse hit her, and said nothing. On the 3rd attempt she closed her eyes entirely, tracked Paula by the sound of her footfall on the composite floor, 3-beat rhythm, left heavy, and stepped aside before the pulse fired. Your light is good, Maya said. Your feet tell me when it's coming. Paula's skin dots went a complicated color that Maya had started to think of as embarrassed green. Then Thorn. Thorn was a problem of a different scale. 7 feet of Cran exoskeleton meant that the kinetic weight behind even a casual strike registered as a structural event. He came at Maya with the slow, deliberate buildup of something that had been formally trained in calculated force application, weight shift, center of gravity drop, 2-stage extension, and she watched him telegraphing it for a full 2 seconds before it landed. She did not dodge. She stepped into it, got both forearms up in an X-frame against his extending limb, absorbed the impact, which hit like a wall moving toward you, and used the redirect to roll his momentum sideways. It did not work cleanly. She ended up on one knee, her forearms singing with the impact, a sharp and specific pain running up from both wrists that she noted and filed away as acceptable. But Thorn ended up facing the wrong direction, his weight over the wrong foot, and he knew it. He turned back to look at her. You went to your knee, he said. Yes, Maya said. She stood up. Her wrist still hurt. She did not mention this. You're teaching us to do things your manual says are losses, Thorn said. My manual doesn't have that page in it, Maya said. She was about to run the sequence again when the bay door opened. Professor Velnik stood in the frame. He took in the room with the specific quality of someone who had already decided what they were going to find before they opened the door and found exactly that. His 4 primary digits were folded in front of him. His data slate was at his side. He looked at Maya, at the 3 cadets, at the scuff marks on the composite floor, at the vibration spike on the bench. He said nothing for a long moment. Unauthorized physical contact in an unsupervised non-matrix environment, he said. That is a directorate violation. Yes, Maya said. The penalization protocol would result in restricted evaluation access. He looked at the 3 cadets, for all 4 of you. Rickson's scales went white at the edges. Paula's patches dimmed. Thorn's breathing seal did a long, slow cycle. Maya said, what are you offering instead? Velnix's eye clusters rotated toward her. Something moved in them, not warmth exactly, but something adjacent to respect, the kind a taxonomist might feel upon discovering a genuinely novel specimen. He set the data slate on the equipment crate nearest the door. Commander Vex has requested an expanded first-year integration cohort for the war games. His simulation parameters allow for a supplemental opposing unit, 12 to 15 cadets, drawn from the reserve list. He paused, The exercise is formally sanctioned. The contact protocols inside the Matrix are non-lethal. Another pause. The outcome will be logged. Logged for whom? Maya asked. The Advanced Warfare Program Review Board meets 6 weeks after the war games conclude. They draw from logged outcomes when selecting candidates for accelerated track integration. He picked up the data slate. I am not offering this as an incentive, cadet. I am offering it as context. Maya looked at the 3 cadets. Rickson's scales were cycling blue to gray to blue. Parla's patches had gone that complicated green again. Thorn had not moved at all, which with Thorn meant he had already decided. We'll need 8 more cadets from the reserve list, Maya said. Velnix looked at her. 12 minimum for the supplemental unit, she said. We have 4. The reserve list is available through the standard. I know where the reserve list is, Maya said. I've already identified the 8. I'm informing you so the paperwork is correct. Velnix was quiet for a moment. Then he took the data slate and left. The bay door sealed behind him. The 2 overhead panels hummed at their slightly different frequencies, that faint, uneven beat filling the silence. Thorn looked at Maya. You already identified 8 more. Yes, Maya said. Before tonight. Yes. His breathing seal let out a long exhale. The 7-minute thing, he said. You knew I was going to come. I knew you needed the 7 minutes to decide, Maya said. That's different. She picked up the vibration spike from the bench and slipped it into her utility pocket. 1700 hours. Tomorrow, bring the others. The jungle simulation was not a jungle. That was the first thing Maya registered when the environmental matrix finished loading. The smell was wrong. Real jungle smelled of wet rot and living soil and something green and sharp underneath everything else. The smell of a system that was constantly dying and eating itself and growing back. This smelled of generated moisture and composite substrate and the faint mineral bite of the matrix projectors cycling at full load. Close, but off. She filed it away. Commander Vex had initialized the scenario from a central command position half a kilometer into the canopy, and his deployment was, Maya had to admit, precise. 40 senior tactical veterans spread across a classic encirclement grid, heavy armored columns on the primary access corridors, light reconnaissance units on the flanking elevations, a 3-layer deep support structure holding the river crossings. The geometry was perfect, airtight. It had probably won him 60 of his 212 simulations on its own. She looked at it from the upper canopy, lying flat against a synthetic branch, the bark texture rough against her utility jacket, and she thought about how a shape like that was built to stop something that moved in straight lines. Below her in the riverbed, Rickson's element was doing exactly what she had told them to do, moving loudly, obviously, flagrantly. Open comm channels carrying coordinates, flares burning at intervals. Thorn's voice carrying beautifully through the canopy because Thorn was physically incapable of being quiet, calling out formations that were 3 minutes out of date by the time he called them. Vex's heavy center was already moving. She watched the trajectory readouts on her wrist map, the soft green lines of Vex's columns converging on the riverbed like water finding a drain. He was committing. Of course he was. The data said commit. The data said the target was right there, loud and obvious and slow. She clicked twice with her back teeth. The signal carried through the comms on a low-band Morse pattern, 2 taps, then a pause, then 2 taps. Nothing digital. Nothing the Matrix could intercept and analyze. Just sound in a specific rhythm that Parla's team, 300 meters to the east, had been trained to recognize and act on. They moved quietly. She could not see them from the canopy. She could not hear them. She felt their movement only as an absence. The way certain sounds stopped when they passed through an area, the way the Matrix's ambient birdsong simulation stuttered slightly when a mass of bodies displaced the audio field. She watched Vex's readouts and counted. 43 seconds, 50, 60. Then she felt it before she saw it, a shift in Vex's formation. Not the columns, those were still driving forward, still certain. The shift was in the command cluster, 200 meters behind the front line. She watched the tactical display update, watched Vex's position indicator move 2 steps left, then stop. He had looked at the riverbed data. She knew what he had found. She had designed it carefully, the automated signaling spikes Rickson's element had placed before they melted back into the canopy, the flares still burning on timers, the footprints in the simulated mud leading forward, leading toward Vex's advancing columns, and then simply stopping. No bodies, no weapons signatures, no heat signatures. Just footprints that ended. Then, in rapid sequence, the comm network registered 4 simultaneous dead zones at the eastern flank, not interference, not equipment failure, 4 communication nodes going dark at once, precise and coordinated, the way things went dark when someone put a hand over them. Vex's position indicator stopped moving entirely. Commander Vex had never, in 40 cycles of undefeated simulation record, looked at a tactical display and found the enemy was not where the display said they should be. He had built his entire career on the fundamental assumption that data was truth, that if the sensors said the target was in the riverbed, the target was in the riverbed, that if the footprints led forward, something had walked forward. He had not modeled for the possibility that the footprints were the message, not the information. In the canopy above him, Maya Okonkwo lay still against the synthetic bark and counted the dead zones, 1, 2, 3, 4, and watched the most decorated commander in the High Galactic Tactical Directorate come to a complete, absolute architectural stop. His columns were 300 meters into the riverbed. His eastern flank had no coverage. And somewhere in the razorvine undergrowth, Parler's element was already moving through the gap. Vex had 4 communication nodes dark and 60 seconds to decide what that meant. He chose wrong. That was the part Maya had planned for most carefully, not the attack itself, but the moment after the first surprise, when a commander with 40 cycles of undefeated record would look at bad data and reach for the explanation that had never failed him before. She knew what that explanation would be: equipment fault, matrix interference, a calibration error in the canopy sensor array, something mechanical, something fixable. Something that was not a 15-person outcast unit with no formal asymmetric training, and one human with a vibration spike in her pocket, systematically taking his network apart. He sent a diagnostic ping to the dark nodes. The ping returned nothing. She heard his order go out over the command channel. She had left one receiver open deliberately, a single passive line tuned to his frequency. His voice was even, controlled, the voice of a commander who had not yet admitted to himself that the shape of what was happening was not a shape he had a name for. Secondary reconnaissance to Eastern Corridor. Confirm status of nodes 7 through 10. She clicked twice with her teeth. 1, 2, pause 1. In the undergrowth below and to the east, Parler's element stopped moving and went flat. The secondary reconnaissance unit Vex dispatched was good, fast movers, light on the matrix floor, visually oriented, trained to spot heat signatures and movement displacement. They reached the eastern corridor in 40 seconds. They found the nodes, intact, physically undamaged, simply turned to face the wrong direction with their receivers packed tight with synthetic debris. 40 seconds of work. Maya's team had done it in the dark, by hand, using nothing but the sound location drills she had run in Base 7 for 3 days. The reconnaissance unit sent its report back. Vex went quiet for 11 seconds. Maya counted them. Then his heavy columns, still driving forward into the riverbed, received a recall order. Too late. She had known it would be too late. The recall order required the columns to stop, reverse, reorient, and drive back through terrain they had already compressed, which with heavy armored units took 4 minutes at minimum. She had 4 minutes of open eastern flank. She had planned for 3. Parler's element moved. At the same moment, from the northern canopy, a direction Vex had not committed forces to because the northern approach was elevated and narrow, and the models said it was a poor attack angle. Thorne's voice came over the open channel. Not Morse, not signal. Just Thorne speaking at full volume in his filtration-distorted baritone, reading out a set of coordinates that were completely fictional, in a tone so certain and so unhurried that any commander running pattern recognition on voice stress would have flagged it as a primary tactical report. Vex's Northern Reserve moved to intercept. Now his center was in the riverbed. His eastern flank was open. His Northern Reserve was chasing a voice. His command cluster had 4 dead nodes and a diagnostic mystery and an 11-second gap where the undefeated record had been asked a question it had never been asked before. Maya dropped from the canopy. She landed in the soft, generated soil of the simulation floor and walked, not ran, walked toward Vex's command position, because running made noise and noise had a direction, and she had spent 2 weeks teaching her squad that the most dangerous thing a human being could do in any environment was become genuinely difficult to locate. She moved through the razor vines the way she had learned to move through dense terrain as a child, which was not a skill she had been taught so much as a thing her body had simply decided, at some point, was necessary. Behind her, without signal, without digital communication, without anything the Matrix could read or intercept or model, 4 ghost cells activated. This was E16, and it was the part that Vex would spend the rest of his career trying to explain. The simulation's non-lethal pulse tag system worked on a simple principle. Tagged units were flagged as eliminated and removed from active tactical modeling. They were supposed to stand down, walk to the edge of the Matrix, wait for the scenario to conclude. That was doctrine, that was the rule. That was what every species in the galaxy did when the system said they were out, because the system's judgment was final, and participating in a simulation after elimination was a directorate violation with serious academic consequences. Maya had explained this to her eliminated units very clearly. She had also explained something else. The pulse tag system logged elimination status centrally. It did not physically prevent movement. It did not cut comms. It did not stop a person from continuing to move through the canopy, making noise, clicking Morse against their teeth, pressing synthetic debris into sensor nodes, and generally behaving in a way that the tactical modeling system could not account for, because the tactical modeling system had been built with the assumption that eliminated units obeyed the rules. Human military history, Maya had told them in Bay 7, the day before the simulation, was full of battles where the side that ignored the assumption won. No one from the Directorate had thought to put a rule against this specifically because no species had ever done it. It had not required doing because it had not required thinking of. The convention against it was implicit, obvious, understood. The way a door you have never locked has never been locked because no one had ever tried to open it. Ghost Cell 1 reached the supply depot on the simulation's western edge and flagged it as seized. Ghost Cell 2 collapsed the northern river crossing and held it with 3 eliminated cadets and a repurposed trajectory holomapper broadcasting Vex's own formation codes back at his reserve units. Ghost Cell 3 hit the communications relay at the canopy's center and went to work with the same hand-packed debris technique, turning receivers, burying transponders, reducing Vex's command picture 1 node at a time. Ghost Cell 4, Rickson's element, the bait, the decoys who had walked loudly down the riverbed and then stopped being there, had circled 300 meters south and was now standing behind Vex's heaviest column with pulse tag flags and the specific patience of a species that had learned from a human to stop thinking about geometry and start thinking about closing distance. Vex's tactical display was, by this point, showing him something it had never shown him in 40 cycles. It was showing him that he was losing. No, that wasn't right. It was showing him that he had already lost, and the display had simply not caught up to the fact yet. He did the thing that commanders with undefeated records do in moments they have no category for. He ordered his center to reform. He called his eastern flank back. He recalled the northern reserve. He tried to collapse his formation back to a defensible core, a sound move, textbook, the right geometric response to encirclement. Maya stood at the edge of the tree line, 40 meters from his command tent, and watched it. She was caked in grey mud up to the shoulders. The simulation rain had found her in the canopy and followed her down, and the combined effect was that she was almost exactly the color of the generated soil she was standing in, which was not accidental. She had read once about a human commander who had said that the best camouflage was not invisibility, but irrelevance, the appearance of being so obviously part of the background that the eye simply moved past you to find the actual threat. She had liked that. She had filed it away. Vex's reforms were not going to work. She knew this because reforming required the units to respond to orders, and 3 of his 4 communication relays were now either dark or feeding him his own signals back. His columns were receiving contradictory routing instructions. His northern reserve had stopped moving entirely, caught between 2 sets of coordinates that both sounded authoritative and led in opposite directions. She clicked out the final Morse sequence. 1, 2, 3, pause 1. On the eastern approach, Parler's element flagged the last 4 simulation objectives as seized. The environmental matrix registered it. 40% of total strategic assets seized simultaneously in under 8 minutes by units that the tactical modeling system had already counted as eliminated. The simulation's overhead system processed the numbers and did the math, and came back with a result it displayed in the muted, institutional amber of a system reporting something it had not been designed to see. Objective lock confirmed. Vex looked at the display. He did not speak. He did not move. The rain in the simulation fell in long, silver lines across the roof of his command tent, and the veteran commander, with 40 cycles of undefeated record, stood over a console that was telling him something his entire career had been built on the premise of never hearing. 6 of his officers had already gone still. Not afraid, not panicked, just stopped. The way systems stop when you give them an input they have no subroutine to handle. And then one of them spoke. A junior adjutant, exoskeletal, young enough that his carapace still held its original color. He looked at the display. He looked at the objective lock. He looked at the total strategic assets column and the number beside it. "Sir," he said, "the casualty count on the human side." He paused. "It's 60%. Vex looked at the number. 60% of Maya's cohort had been tagged out. 9 of her 15 cadets, eliminated, gone, and from their eliminated status, from the place the doctrine said they should have stopped existing as tactical factors, they had continued to operate, to signal, to deceive, to seize. She had spent them. She had known before the simulation started, before the matrix loaded, before the rain began, that she was going to spend them. She had brought 15 cadets into the jungle knowing that the math of what she was planning required, accepting losses she could count in advance, and she had accepted them, and she had used the spent cadets as her most effective weapon. "Sir," the adjutant said again. His voice had gone flat in a way that had nothing to do with training. "The eliminated units, they're still in the matrix." Vex turned from the display. "I know," he said. "They never stood down." "I know," Vex said. There was a silence. "What do we call that?" the adjutant asked. The rain kept falling. Vex did not answer, not because he didn't know, because there were 2 answers, and the first was the word the directorate would use: violation, irregularity, protocol breach. And the second was the word that was sitting in the back of his mind with the quiet, immovable certainty of something that had been true for a long time and had simply not had occasion to introduce itself. The word was doctrine. Specifically, whose? She had not violated his doctrine, she had replaced it. He looked up at the tree line. Maya Okonkwo walked out of it. She walked out of the tree line the way water walks out of a crack in stone, not with force, not with announcement, just with the patient certainty of something that had always been going to end up exactly here. Commander Vex did not move. He had not moved in 43 seconds. She had counted them from the tree line before stepping out. 43 seconds was, she had once read in a Terran behavioral study she was not supposed to have access to on the academic network, the precise interval at which a primate brain transitions from the processing of shock into the processing of meaning. Below 43 seconds, still computing. Above, understanding has arrived, and the body is simply waiting for the mind to accept it. The veteran commander had arrived at understanding. She could see it in the way his faceplate sat, not tight, not aggressive, but settled. The way a structure settles when the load-bearing element it had been relying on has been quietly, irrevocably removed. The rain in the simulation fell in long silver lines. She stopped 5 paces from him, not 3, not 7, 5, the precise distance at which two beings of their respective sizes could speak without raising their voices, and at which neither one was inside the other's reach. She had done that calculation before she left the tree line. She had done most calculations before she needed them. She did not raise a weapon, she was not holding one. She was holding a terminal override drive, a flat, matte gray chip, standard issue, the kind of administrative hardware that simulation proctors used to reset matrix parameters, and that first-year integration cadets were absolutely not supposed to have taken from the proctor's equipment shelf in sub-level Bay 7 3 nights ago while Velnix's back was turned. It was the size of her palm. It weighed almost nothing. Behind Vex, the tactical console chimed 3 times. Low, even, final. The sound of a system that had run its numbers and arrived at a conclusion it had no polite way to deliver. She watched his primary eye clusters track from her face to the drive to the console display and then back to her face, and she could see the exact moment he read the number. Not because his expression changed, it didn't. Because his breathing seal, the scarred iron-rimmed membrane across his mid-thorax that had been cycling in its steady, controlled rhythm since the rain began, missed a beat. Just one. Just enough. The scenario is concluded, Commander, she said. Her voice dropped into the synthetic downpour the way an anchor drops into still water. No edge to it, no satisfaction, just the plain delivery of a fact that was already true before she said it. Your manual is officially out of print. He looked at her for a long moment. The rain kept falling. Somewhere behind her in the canopy, she could hear the simulation's ambient birdsong cycling back on, the Matrix's way of acknowledging that the tactical event had concluded and the environmental parameters were returning to neutral. Birdsong after a battle. She had always found that detail, in every simulation she had ever run, to be the most quietly honest thing the Directorate had ever programmed. You used 60% casualties, Vex said finally. His voice was controlled. She gave him that. Yes. You knew the number before the matrix loaded. It was not a question, she answered it anyway. Yes. His faceplates shifted, not the threat spread she had learned to read in the Cran cadets, not the anxiety pale of Rickson's scales. Something else. Something she did not have a species behavioral index for, because she had not read a behavioral study on Commander Vex specifically, only on the class of commander he represented. She filed it away for later. You planned for your own dead, he said. I planned for my eliminated units, she said. There is a distinction. Enlighten me. Dead units are a cost, Maya said. Eliminated units, in a system that assumes eliminated units will comply with elimination protocol, are a resource. She kept her voice even, not because she was performing evenness, she did not perform, because this was simply the most accurate description of the thing she had done, and accuracy was the only register she had ever found worth using. The protocol exists because every species in the Directorate has agreed that when the system says you're out, you're out. The assumption is universal. That makes the assumption a structural element. And structural elements, she said, are what you build your attack around. Vex was quiet. Behind him, his 6 officers had not moved. The junior adjutant with the still original carapace was watching Maya with the expression of someone who had been told their entire life that a particular room did not exist and had just been shown the door. 17 warfare conventions, Vex said. In the theoretical exercise, Velnix failed you. Yes. And tonight you violated, He paused. He looked at the console. He looked at the objective lock number. You violated the elimination compliance protocol. Yes. And the ecological manipulation statutes. Your smoke screens used the Matrix's own flora generation system against my forward observers. That's a prohibited environmental weapon under the Third Galactic Convention. Yes. And you ran unauthorized non-digital communications throughout the engagement. The Morse percussion system is not listed in any approved tactical communication index. No, Maya said, it isn't. He looked at her. It predates the index, she said, by approximately 30,000 years. The rain fell. The birdsong cycled. Somewhere in the canopy behind her, she heard the soft, distinct sound of someone's breathing seals cycling, Thorn, emerging from the tree line with the careful, deliberate weight of someone who had learned, in the last 2 weeks, to move more quietly than his species had ever thought necessary. Rickson came out next, his scales somewhere between blue and a color she had not seen him reach before, something darker, more settled. Then Parla, her skin dots burning a clear, steady green that Maya had finally identified, after 14 days of observation, as the Felnari color for something that had no direct Terran translation, but that she had privately begun to think of as arrived. 12 more cadets stepped out of the jungle behind them, mud-caked, rain-soaked, pulse-stagged and technically eliminated and entirely present. Vex looked at them. Then he looked at his officers, then at the console, then at the display that was still showing him the objective lock in muted institutional amber. Then he looked at Maya Okonkwo. Your team, he said, and his voice had changed, not broken, not softened, but recalibrated in the way a precision instrument recalibrates when it encounters a measurement it was not built to take. Tell me something honestly. Yes, she said. Was any of this improvised? She considered the questions seriously, the way she considered all questions that deserved serious consideration. The smoke screen placement, she said, the canopy acoustics were different from the matrix specs I'd modeled. I had to adjust the dispersal timing by 90 seconds. A pause, and Thorne's coordinate broadcast, he was supposed to run it for 40 seconds. He ran it for 70. She glanced back at Thorne. It worked better. Thorne's breathing seal did a long, slow exhale that she had learned, in 2 weeks of close training, meant something adjacent to pride. Everything else, Maya said, turning back to Vex, was the plan. He was quiet for a long time. The simulation rain began to taper, the matrix cycling down, pressure dropping, the artificial downpour thinning to a drizzle, and then to nothing. The canopy above them dripped its last synthetic water into the silence. You will file an incident report, Vex said, acknowledging the protocol violations. Yes, Maya said. The Directorate will review them. Yes, Maya said, they'll add chapters. Vex looked at her. To the manual, she said, Course 101, they'll add the elimination compliance assumption as an explicit rule. They'll add protocols for non-digital communication interdiction. They'll add a third convention subclause about matrix flora weaponization. She kept her voice completely neutral. Then they'll teach those chapters to every cadet in the next cohort and the cohort after that, and eventually the assumptions will be rebuilt and the structural elements will be re-established and the doctrine will be clean and airtight again. A pause. And then, she said, someone will find the next gap. Vex held her gaze for a long moment. Then he did something she had not modeled for. He reached past her, past the override drive in her hand, past the objective lock display, past the console with its 40-cycle undefeated record displayed in a column that now had a number at the bottom of it, and he picked up the simulation tactical manual from the shelf beside his command position. It was a physical copy, printed on compression fiber, sealed with the Directorate's formal crest, heavy, authoritative. The kind of object that had weight not because of its mass, but because of everything it represented. He set it on the console in front of her. She looked at it. Then she drove the vibration spike into it. Not violently, deliberately, The resin tip punched through the compression fiber cover with a sound that was small and specific and carried, in the sudden silence of the drain simulation, farther than it should have. The spike's microfrequency engaged on contact, a quiet, continuous hum that she could feel through the console surface, and that sent a fine, barely visible vibration through the manual's pages. She left it there. The hum filled the space where the rain had been. Debriefing room on level 12 smelled of recycled air and the specific, institutional exhaustion of a space that had hosted too many difficult conversations and been cleaned too thoroughly afterward. The chairs were bolted to the floor. The walls held 40-cycle records in framed display cases. The overhead light was the flat, even white of a room designed to have no atmosphere, because rooms with atmosphere allowed people to feel things during proceedings that were meant to be administrative. 17 of Commander Vex's officers filed medical transfer requests before the debrief began. Maya knew this because Velnix read the number aloud before he sat down, the way a man reads a number he cannot quite believe is real, and so reads it aloud to test whether it stays true when he hears it in his own voice. It stayed true. Persistent psychological disorientation, Velnix read from the transfer forms. He set them down. He looked at Maya across the bare table. The Directorate's standard threshold for a simulation exercise is 2. We have 17. The Directorate's standard threshold, Maya said, was built around species that find predictability stabilizing. Encountering something genuinely outside their predictive model causes a specific kind of cognitive stress that their systems don't have a recovery protocol for. She paused. They'll be fine. They need 3 days and something boring to look at. Rickson made a sound beside her, not quite a laugh, something in the same building. Velnix looked at Rickson, then at Parla, then at Thorne, who was sitting in the reinforced chair at the end of the table with the careful stillness of someone who had recently discovered that careful stillness was a skill and was now applying it everywhere. Then Velnix looked at the 8 other cadets ranged along the debriefing room wall, mud still drying in the creases of their utilities, pulse tags still active on 4 of them. Then he looked back at Maya. "The Advanced Warfare Program," he said. "Yes," she said. He folded his 4 primary digits on the table. "The review board meets in 6 weeks. I know. The logged outcome of tonight's exercise will be part of the review file." "I know. The review board," Velnix said carefully, "has never admitted a first-year cohort." "I know," Maya said. "They'll need to revise the admissions framework." Velnix was quiet for a moment. Then, "All 15. "All 15, Maya said. "The ones who were eliminated operate under the same principles as the ones who weren't. Separating the cohort would be inaccurate." "The ones who were eliminated," Velnix said, "violated the compliance protocol." "The ones who were eliminated," Maya said, "won the simulation." He looked at her. She looked back. The overhead light hummed, the recycled air recycled. Somewhere in the framed cases on the walls, 40 cycles of undefeated records sat in their institutional display, and Maya did not look at them because she had already read them, before the war games, before Bay 7, before the cafeteria, before Row 14. She had read every record in this room the 3rd day after she arrived at the Interstellar Defense Hub, because when you were the only one who looked fragile, reading the records was simply what you did. "The Advanced Warfare Program," Velnix said finally, "operates at a 70% casualty washout matrix." "For non-Deathworlders," Maya said. He said nothing. "The casualty rate is calculated assuming a standard break threshold," she said, "the point at which a unit accepts that its losses make continued engagement irrational." She kept her voice even. "We don't have that threshold, or rather, we have it. It's just set somewhere that your calculation doesn't reach." The silence in the room was a specific kind of silence, not empty, full, the kind that forms when a room full of beings has heard something true and is deciding what to do with the fact of its truth. Thorne's breathing seal cycled, slow and deliberate, the sound of something that had made a decision and was at peace with it. Parla's skin dots, visible in the flat white light, were burning clear and steady. not anxious amber, not complicated green, something she had never shown in the cafeteria or the training bay or the canopy, something that looked, in Felnari chromatic language, like a complete sentence. Rixon's scales had stopped cycling entirely. They had settled, blue and even and still, the color of a deep ocean on a planet that had no storms. Maya reached into her utility pocket and took out the vibration spike. She set it on the table between herself and Velnix, its resin tip resting against the smooth surface, its microfrequency humming quietly in the recycled air. She did not tap it. She left it there. The galaxy didn't invite us to study warfare, she said. Her voice was the same voice she had used in Row 14, in Bay 7, in the jungle, 5 paces from the undefeated commander in the simulation reign. Even, accurate. The voice of someone who had already decided what she was going to say and found no reason to perform uncertainty about it. They invited us to edit it. Velnix looked at the vibration spike. Then he looked at her. Then he picked up his data slate and began to type. The Advanced Warfare Program intake form was 47 fields long. He did not look up from it while he typed. He did not ask her to confirm the names. He had the roster from the War Games manifest, and she had ensured, when she filed the supplemental cohort paperwork 3 weeks ago, that every name was spelled correctly. She had spelled everything correctly. She watched him type. Behind her, in the framed display cases, 40 cycles of undefeated records sat quietly in their cases, and below them, on a shelf that had previously held only one tactical manual, there was now a manual with a vibration spike through its cover and a fine, continuous hum running through its pages. The hum was still going. She could hear it from across the room. Velnix finished the last field. He set the data slate on the table. He looked at the form the way a man looks at something he has just signed and knows is irreversible. The Crucible begins in 3 weeks, he said. The Advanced Warfare Program does not calibrate its parameters for incoming cohorts. The environment will not adjust to your capabilities. Your capabilities will be expected to adjust to the environment. Yes, Maya said. She stood. That's how we prefer it. She picked up the vibration spike from the table, the hum ending the moment she lifted it, the silence that followed clean and complete, and slipped it into her utility pocket. The door to the debriefing room opened. She walked through it without looking back, because she had already read the room, already read the records in the cases, already read the 47 fields on the intake form over Velnix's shoulder while he typed, and there was nothing left behind her that she hadn't already filed away. The corridor outside level 12 smelled of recycled air, and the specific, functional quiet of a building that did not know yet what it had agreed to. Thorn fell into step beside her, then Rixon, then Parla, then the others, one by one, the soft percussion of boots on corridor floor building into something that sounded, if you knew what to listen for, like a rhythm. Not a march, not a formation. Something older than both. 3 weeks, Rixon said. His voice was even. His scales were blue and still. 3 weeks, Maya confirmed. She did not slow down. She did not stop. She walked the way she had walked out of the tree line, not with force, not with announcement, but with the patient certainty of something that had always been going to end up exactly here. The lights in the corridor ran long and white ahead of them. Behind them, somewhere on level 12, the recycled air moved through a room where a tactical manual sat on a shelf with a hole through its cover, and nobody had taken it down yet, and nobody would, not tonight, not tomorrow, not until someone filed the paperwork to remove it, and the paperwork would take time, and in that time the hole would simply be there, visible to anyone who walked past. The galaxy had not invited them to study warfare. They were already enrolled. They told us the Deathworlders were gone. They were wrong. We just moved our training grounds to your sky.